The picture which you have just seen demonstrates the remarkable intelligence of the white rat after it has been educated. The rat was trained by me. I'm Dr. Law Seng Chai. Chai is my last name. I'm professor of psychology at Tulane University. After many years of experiments with the white rat, I have found that this small animal not only has a remarkable high intelligence in learning ability, but it can also utilize as well as extend what he has learned to adapt a new environment. This is what I call adaptive behavior. The first principle we have employed in training the rats is called instrumental conditioning. In our experiments, we train the white rat to do certain things, and after he has done that response, we feed him, so that that response becomes an instrumental conditioned response because it has become a tool or a means to the end of obtaining food. The second principle we use is called chaining. That is, combining a number of conditioned responses to form a complex behavior pattern. The third principle is called trial and error learning. After the animal has learned a number of conditioned responses or solved a number of problems, then I give him a test by presenting him with a new environment which requires the utilization as well as organization of his past experiences in order to adapt to the new environment. This is what I call adaptive behavior. The first two experiments demonstrate the principle of instrumental conditioning. When the white rat is put on the water mirror, he will move the roller in order to get water. As soon as that response is reinforced, it becomes an instrumental conditioned response in order to get water. The second experiment has to do with the pushing of the stick in order to obtain cheese. If he hasn't got it the first time, he comes back to push it again. The next two experiments illustrate the principle of chaining. Here the white rat has learned to push a car first, and then to climb up the car and jump to the column in order to reach the goal. This shows that the white rat is pulling the string, and then to carry the coin and to deposit the coin on a dish in order to obtain cheese. These several steps are chained together, and you notice that he has to put it right. Usually the white rats will learn by trial and error. Here we have two rats cooperating, one pulling in the other, and then the two stepping on the two keys simultaneously in order to open the door to reach the goal. The following 5 tests are tests of adaptive behavior. After a rat has learned to pour up a water bucket to drink water, he can reverse the process by pulling down the bucket to refill water without previous learning. This experiment has to do with climbing up the ladder from the first story to the second. After the white rat has reached the second story, he pulls up the string in order to raise the ladder to get to the third floor. After he has finished the food, he has to come down, and in the meantime, I have already pulled down the ladder. So without any previous training, he just pull up the ladder and drop down with the ladder without any training at all. This has to do with readjustment and reorganization of two past experiences which have been learned separately. One of them is pushing the car, the other is swinging the basket. And the white rat combines the two out of his own accord without any previous training. In this experiment, a shortcut is presented. Instead of taking the long route as he has done, now he climbs up the ladder directly to the goal. The last experiment shows that when the ladder is made useless by pushing it out, the rat notices that the ladder goes nowhere, so he decides to take the long route and therefore he pushes the car and climb up the column and bring in the basket and swing over to the goal which prove adaptive behavior in the white rat. These are scientific experiments in comparative psychology. The first aim of our experiment is to compare animal behavior with human behavior in order to discover any fundamental principle underlying the learning process and adaptive behavior of both species. The second aim of our experiment is to develop more sensitive and more effective techniques for studying the behavioral effects of many important factors such as brain damage due to anoxia, X-irradiation, or drugs. In the past, people have used very simple techniques to test the effect upon avoidance conditioning, which does not reveal the effect upon the higher functions of the central nervous system. Since the more complex adaptive behavior of our white rats are more comparable to the complex human behavior, we fear that our techniques will prove to be an invaluable contribution to the study of such factors upon human behavior.